The Isle of Wight was formed during the Ice Age, when rising sea levels flooded the Solent River. This created an island measuring approximately 37 by 21 kilometres. Apart from local coastal erosion caused by weather and wave action, this is as we see it today. The island enjoys good soil for farming and the growing of market produce, which has given it its name, England's Garden Isle. For most of its existence as an island, fishing, dairy and arable farming, as well as the growing of fruit and vegetables, have provided islanders with employment. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the island had a low population. Ryde consisted of a few fishermen's cottages. Sandown, Shanklin and Ventnor were tiny villages, and a few water mills ground the local farmers' corn. All this changed with the introduction of a regular and reliable ferry service from Portsmouth to Ryde in 1820. Railways were introduced to the island in 1862, but before this, transport was slow, bumpy, expensive and inconvenient. The roads were nothing more than muddy, potholed cart tracks. A daily stagecoach service connected most towns by the 1840s, but only in the summer months, and mainly for wealthy holidaymakers who had discovered the island's beauty. Few islanders strayed far from their home villages, as only the well-off could afford to travel by stagecoach. In the mid-1800s, Queen Victoria made Osborne House, in East Cowes, her summer residence, and the Queen's presence transformed a quiet island into a favourite holiday destination for Victorians. Road transport, as we've seen, was uncomfortable and expensive, so it was not surprising that plans were drawn up to introduce railways to the island. They would prove effective and a less expensive way of moving farm produce to the island's ports for shipment to the mainland, and for taking passengers to their holiday accommodation. The first railway on the island opened in 1862 and linked Cowes, a busy port for passengers arriving from the mainland, with Newport, the island's capital. Between 1864 and 1900, the entire network, operated by 8 individual companies with a total of 88 kilometres of track and 36 stations, was completed, and interconnecting routes were established from all parts of the island. In 1923, all the companies were amalgamated as part of Southern Railways. All of these lines remained open for goods and passengers until the early 1950s. From the very beginning, the island's railway engines, passenger carriages and goods wagons were all hand-me-downs from mainland railways. Originally, all were four-wheeled, built of wood and lit by oil lamps, if lit at all. Eventually, longer bogie coaches were shipped to the island. These seated more passengers and gave a smoother ride. Unfortunately, the island railways largely ran at a loss, as most passenger traffic was seasonal, and the transport of goods, such as cereal crops, tomatoes, strawberries and cut flowers, was dependent on when they were ready for the market. Up to 19 wagons of produce could be taken from one of the island's country stations each day of the growing season. During the winter months, when holidaymakers had gone home and the growing season had ended, many engines and carriages stood out of use until the next season. Revenue made during the summer was not enough to make a profit, and losses continued until the end of steam power in 1966. The island's main bus company, the Vectis Omnibus, had started its services in 1921 in direct competition with the railways. In 1929, the company was purchased by the Southern Railway and became Southern Vectis. With this acquisition, the railway now controlled its main competitor and had a monopoly on island transport. All this changed with the arrival of the touring coach and private motor car. Holidaymakers who had previously travelled to the island by electric train, ferries and island steam train to their destination now enjoyed the freedom of bringing their own cars to the island on the new and larger vehicle ferries. During the Second World War, holiday traffic to the island was forbidden, so a much reduced service of passenger trains was provided. In 1946, when wartime restrictions on travel were lifted, holidaymakers returned to the island and the railways once again were busy. Trains were filled to capacity, with queues of passengers stretching the entire length of Ryde Pier. Despite this welcome return of business, it was again mainly seasonal. Several lines remained underused and therefore unprofitable. So overall, despite the large number of holidaymakers, the island's railways were losing money. Nationalisation of railways began in 1948 and cutbacks to the island network soon followed. Closures were inevitable. The first to go in 1952 was the line from Merston to Ventnor West. This was followed in 1953 by the line from Brading to Bembridge and the entire line from Newport to Freshwater. In 1956, the line from Sandown to Newport closed. 10 years later, under the Beeching cuts, services were withdrawn on the Ryde to Newport and Cowes lines, and between Shanklin and Ventnor. These closures brought to an end 104 years of steam train operation on the Isle of Wight. The remaining Ryde to Shanklin line was electrified and remains to this day as a passenger-only service operated by ex-London Underground tube trains. Despite these closures, and thanks to a dedicated band of volunteers, it is still possible to travel by steam on the island in a traditional way. The Isle of Wight Steam Railway started life at the semi-derelict Haven Street station on the former Ryde to Newport line. Their flagship engine, number 24 Calborn, which had been in storage at the closed Newport station for 4 years, was moved to Haven Street at the end of January 1971 and for 20 years operated on a 2-kilometre section of this line from Haven Street to Wootton. In 1991, an extension of 5 kilometres opened to Ashy and Smallbrook Junction. This involved reclaiming new sections of the old overgrown trackbed and many hours of volunteer labour. First, a layer of stones and ballast was laid, followed by wooden sleepers and metal chairs. Finally, the rails were lifted into place and secured, then connected together with fish plates. Once the track was secure enough to run on, extra ballast was brought in by wagon to bring the line up to the correct level. As the line advanced towards Smallbrook, the foundations were laid for the new interchange station and platform, which was opened on the 20th of July 1991 and now provides a connection with Island Line. The Isle of Wight Steam Railway now occupies about 8 kilometres of the old Ryde to Newport line, which had originally opened in 1875. The Steam Railway is a working museum as well as a holiday attraction and seeks to show its visitors how the island's railways operated during the steam era. Restoration of old carriages, wagons and island engines is ongoing, and our team of volunteers are kept busy throughout the year in the carriage and wagon workshops. Make sure you visit them, and also Train Story, where you can discover more about Haven Street and the Island Railways past and present.